Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our August edition of our Sidewalks to Science webinar series. I'm Amber Porter, and I'm a research project manager here at Komen headquarters. Today, we are excited to welcome Dr. Rachel Walker, a Career Catalyst Research Grantee, as our presenter. Dr. Walker became the first nurse to be named an Invention Ambassador by the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is a very prestigious award. Welcome, Dr. Walker.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'd be very happy to. So I think the beginning of my presentation gives a little bit of background on who I am and how I became a nurse. I am an assistant professor in the College of Nursing at the University of Massachusetts Amherst.
And did you know you always wanted to be a breast cancer research, and how did you get into breast cancer research?
I'd be happy to answer that. And to do so, first, I'd like everyone on the webinar, hello, welcome, travel back in time with me. Many years ago, before I was ever a nurse, I was a Peace Corps volunteer assigned to a rural health clinic on the edge of the Sahara. And one day, a very pregnant young woman walked into our clinic. And I looked at her and looked down, and there between her legs was an umbilical cord, which for anyone who knows anything about labor and delivery, this is an emergency. It's a life and death situation for both the baby and the mother. And here in the United States, in such a situation, we would rush them immediately back to the emergency room, to the operating room. But in this case, that just wasn't a possibility. And in fact, the only healthcare professional in the clinic was a nurse. I wasn't one at the time. And so I called for her, and immediately she came running. She embraced the woman. She looked at what was going on. She laid her down on the waiting room floor and got to work, talking to the woman, explaining what she was doing. Her hands were moving quickly. She quickly learned that the baby was breech and couldn't come out. So she started to move the child in the woman's stomach, and within minutes, the baby was born. But it wasn't over yet. Turned out it was twins. And so several minutes after that, another child was born. And the next day, the woman and her two children walked out of the clinic. And I thought, wow, medicine is never going to cut it for me. I need to be a nurse. And so fast forward, several years later, I'm a registered nurse, and I'm working in one of the most technologically advanced cancer centers in the country. The pace is relentless. The alarms are incessant. I can barely, in a 12-hour shift, catch 1 or 2 minutes really to be present or engaged in conversation at the bedside with my patients. And in fact, it's so frenetic that oftentimes I will take my lunch break and sign off my other patients to other nurses just so I can spend maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes checking in with those who really seem like they need someone to be there, to be as present as that nurse was back in West Africa with her patient. One day, after all the docs were leaving the room of a person I had cared for the better part of a year, they turned to me and they said, "Rachel, I don't even feel human anymore." And that was a crisis for me as a nurse, to see that the lack of caring in the system we had designed, as advanced as it was affecting patients. And so I was set on a path to pursue my graduate studies. I eventually earned a Ph.D. and did a postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins and became a nurse scientist so that I could actually lead the types of clinical trials and develop the new types of care strategies and technologies that might help to address this problem and to best support patients and families in the cancer center. So, nursing science, and we earn PhDs, we have research doctorates in our field. It's a caring science. It's focused primarily on creating healing environments and a holistic approach to health and wellness. Although in that mission, we incorporate many types of knowledge, including genetics, precision health, behavioral science, knowledge about health policy. And at the National Institutes of Health, we have our own institute, the National Institute for Nursing Research, the focus of which drives clinical practice. We seek to prevent disease and disability, to manage and eliminate symptoms, especially caused by illness, and to enhance palliative care. And I've been particularly focused on these middle two, preventing disease and disability and managing symptoms that occur frequently in the cancer setting. So many people, when they see our teams, and we have very complex multidisciplinary teams that I lead here at UMass, they wonder, well, how is a nurse scientist different than a physician scientist or any other kind of scientist in the health field? And the question I like to pose to them, I think that best illustrates the difference in how nurse scientists look at challenges in healthcare versus other types of scientists. So just engage with me in a little exercise, just in your head. I want you to ask yourself the following two questions. So the first question goes, how healthy are you? So just keep your answer to that in your head. Now I'm going to pose the question from what I would think a nurse scientist would ask, and that is, what does health look like for you? There's a subtle difference, but it's there, right? In the first, we're putting you on a scale, we're comparing you to other people, we're kind of telling you this is how well or not well you are. In the second, we're asking, where do you want to go? And how does your environment affect how well you are at any given point in time? In the first, we're privileging numbers and physiology. In the second, we're really asking you about function and can you do the things you want to be able to do? You know, are you living the life that you want to be leading? And I think these kinds of differences are what lead nurses to generate the types of research that really have an impact in the healthcare space. So most of my work is driven by the belief that health is, and importantly, capability, your ability to do what you want to be able to do, is a product of the fit between you and your environment. So, you know, environments can be demanding or not demanding. They can be supportive of a person or not supportive. And people fall at all different areas and spectrums in terms of what they're able to do at any given point in time. So here in the right-hand corner, you see my colleague, Dr. Sherry Bloet. She is an attending physician at Spalding Rehab. And you see here, she may not have full control of her lower extremities, but she is a multi-gold medalist Paralympic athlete. She's not only a phenomenal athlete, but she has the kind of environment, the kinds of tools like her racing chair that allow her and support her to achieve her goals. Whereas here in the bottom left, you see a person who maybe is fully capable, you know, healthy in every sense that we might define it, but perhaps in an environment that's not supportive, that's not giving them the tools they need to be well. So this is where I seek to make change. It's the creation of healing environments. And when we came to the Susan G. Komen Foundation, what we were hoping to accomplish is to provide a sort of toolkit, a set of tools to breast cancer survivors specifically that could help them create the types of environments that would promote this, this idea of health for them and the ability to do what they wanted to be able to do in their lives. So we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. We said we want to talk to people of every background, of every stage of breast cancer. And we want to look at what helps them do what they need to be able to do. Both what are the factors, you know, internally that are affecting that, symptoms, you know, illness, different abilities, and what are the external factors in their environment, and can we find a way to help them assess those, to set some goals specific to them, and then to modify their environment in a way that'll help them achieve those goals. And we know that when we do that, it doesn't just help a person feel better, it's not just about quality of life, but when someone has greater sense of control over their health and over their situation, they also have less stress. We lower the types of biomarkers and other things that can contribute to future disease and hopefully help them have a much better experience. So we proposed this to the Komen Foundation. They gave us our grant, but we said, you know, even though we have some ideas about how to do this, as nurses, we always have to start with our patient advocates and with the cancer survivors' perspective on what's really needed in the world. And so we went to over 30, about 38 breast cancer survivors in our region. We spent hours and hours talking to them, people of again, many different backgrounds, all different stages, and actually all different genders. And we found out from them, what are you seeing as the unmet needs? What do you think about these ideas we have about helping you to be as active and as capable as possible in your world? We learned a lot of important things. For example, we learned that many areas in our region still lack access to broadband, high-speed wireless. So if we give people mobile tools, apps, and smartphone-based things, we may not be giving them something that they can really use in their home and community setting. We also learned, because we went to talk to their healthcare providers, over 20 healthcare providers, we asked, what do you think about this idea of giving tools to breast cancer survivors to support activity, to support wellness? And they told us, well, that's a great idea, but if you're trying to give us a bunch of data streams like the activity patterns of breast cancer survivors or their sleep patterns, we can't handle that right now. Our system is just not built to manage it. So those were all important lessons that guided us to generate a toolkit in 4 installments that addresses helping people stay physically active and interrupt sitting and lying down during the day, balance emotions and practice self-compassion. That's something we heard a lot about from our survivor participants. Manage sleep and energy levels. And also, finally, what they told us that wasn't in our original plan was, one of the biggest unmet needs many of them were having well after primary treatment had ended were just questions both related to their cancer experience and to aging and other factors in their life around intimacy and sexual well-being. And all of these resources are designed to be strengths-based. We start with where somebody is, not what's wrong with them. We wanted to give everybody something they could actually hold, not just information. That's something they said was important to them in terms of things they would actually use in their lives, that it be usable straight out of the box. We're mailing these tools to breast cancer survivors so they don't have to travel in to a cancer center to get them. And that they not require technology or internet access, although there are some additional resources we can provide that do use those things. But we learned a bunch of other lessons as well. For example, some of these conversations generated ideas around a study that was funded by the National Institutes of Health, where we started looking at tools and technologies we could use to make invisible symptoms like fatigue visible to others through strategies like eye tracking and showing how eye movements changed in relation to fatigue levels over time. We also heard them when they said, we're concerned about the drugs, not only as they go into our bodies and how our bodies are responding to them, but how they leave our bodies and whether family members and others in our environment are being impacted by them. So we partnered with chemical engineers to develop tools to test for those types of things in home and community spaces. And this is one of our chemical engineering labs that's helping us build those. And finally, we heard about things we hadn't designed the toolkit for, like neuropathies, the numbness and tingling some people experience in fingertips and feet and other parts of the body as a result of certain cancer therapies. And so we partnered with some scientists who build vibrating fabrics, which may be one way to help palliate those symptoms and reduce the disability that results from some of that nerve damage. And we wanted to be inclusive. So while a lot of these strategies work for many people, we also made sure that we heard from metastatic breast cancer survivors who are not always as well represented in some types of research. Some of the members of our community who are from Puerto Rico. We have a very large community here in Western Massachusetts and colleagues working on the island as well. We heard from men with breast cancer who have some particular needs. And we also have a large community here in this region of people in same-sex relationships who also find that some of their care needs might differ. And these are some of our patient advocates from one of the Komen gatherings, and our colleague, Dr. Shirley Pereira, a nurse down in San Juan, who are helping us to extend this work on the island of Puerto Rico and here in our region so we can have a Spanish version of these tools available to those survivors. Finally, most recently, I've gotten very involved in advocacy for patient voices being represented in the areas of leadership in healthcare, where decisions about the types of problems that we solve and what we fund get made. I've been in many meetings through my role here at UMass with the pharmaceutical industry, and one of my frustrations was often finding that the focus was on areas of interest for the industry more so sometimes than for patients. And so I brought that complaint about the lack of patient advocacy and the lack of a specifically nursing voice in those spaces to the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And this spring, they made me an Invention Ambassador. The Invention Ambassadors are a group that are selected each year to help influence thought around invention and the types of things we're inventing for in the country and globally. And our mission is, and my specific mission is not only to inspire and empower nurses like myself to be involved in this process and to educate others about what we do, but also with the ultimate goal of fostering a culture of invention and innovation that is specifically patient-directed, inclusive, and values human dignity and caring science. So I want to thank the Komen Foundation for all of their support, and especially the patient advocates on our teams and all of our participants who've made this work possible. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Rachel. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box down at the bottom. We do have a question. Are you still enrolling in your Toolkit trial?
So our Toolkit trial is in 2 phases. And I know I've gotten some inquiries as of late because we told everyone involved in the first phase that, of course, we are hoping once we listen to people's voices to then invite those people to participate in evaluating the tools we developed. So we actually are working with another company right now to build the tools that we will be testing this year. That trial has not launched yet, but if anyone is interested in potentially participating, we are approved by the IRB to do that work. And you're welcome to reach out to me via email at this address, or to check out our website for that particular study, toolsforwellness.org.
Thank you. You actually answered a couple questions with that.
Oh, good.
So what is your ultimate goal with the information you hope to gain from your continued discussions with patients and patient advocates?
Yeah, I think there's several goals. You know, we were specifically funded by the Komen Foundation to generate some of these tools that I discussed. And so, of course, we're very interested in the best way to do that. But anytime we're engaging in these conversations, I think it's an opportunity for us to have a real dialogue about not just the work that we're presently engaged in, but what are the types of questions we should be answering and what should we be seeking to do in the future. And as I mentioned in this presentation, several of the other projects I highlighted, those were not projects originally identified in our work with the Komen Foundation, but they're projects that have been launched from some of the unmet needs we were hearing from our participants, and ongoing dialogue with them about what they think might be useful to them to meet those needs.
Thank you. We're gonna give everybody just a couple more minutes. We didn't have any more questions yet, but we'll give everybody a couple more minutes.
Sure.
Actually, I just got another question. Okay. So as an AAAS ambassador, what is the current issue you're trying to bring attention to and or solve?
Yeah, so one of my main goals with my involvement in that program as the first nurse to become an Invention Ambassador, very interested in empowering nurses and by extension the communities that nurses serve to be more involved in the process of invention. Nurses have been inventing things to support health and wellness forever, but it's not something that I think the nursing profession has really advertised well in the past, nor when we solve a problem or we generate a new technology or a new tool have we necessarily taken that out to the world and held it up as like, look at what I did, look at me, I'm an inventor. And now, as there are ever expanding resources to support innovation and invention and moving those ideas, those sparks of ideas that people have when they see a problem and think they might have a solution out into reality, I think this is a real moment for nursing and too, I would say for patient advocates, people perhaps who are involved with the Komen Foundation. If you are seeing needs, if you have ideas about something that might help to meet those needs, this is a chance, I think, for some of us who've not historically been thought of as inventors in those spaces to really stand up and to do that work and to be recognized for it.
Thank you. We have another question. Your studies have led to a Puerto Rico spin-off study. Do you notice any disparities, differences between Puerto Rico and the continental U.S. or between people groups, i.e. Hispanics, white Caucasians, etc.?
Yeah, so I actually started my nursing, my graduate school career in a health disparities research program because, of course, this is an ongoing issue across the healthcare spectrum and particularly in cancer as well. One of the reasons I'm the most excited about our collaborations with nurses down in Puerto Rico to do this work and the patient advocates there is because I think there are, we haven't completed the work yet, but I think we are going to see some important differences, not just in the state of health and well-being for individuals, but how best to address their needs and to deliver care. In the middle of this collaboration, Hurricane Maria happened. And so, as you probably know, those hurricanes really devastated the infrastructure in Puerto Rico. And different parts of Puerto Rico were differentially affected by that destruction. So some spaces are regaining a lot of capability and others still have a very long way to go. And in the meantime, we had about more than 1,500 families make their way immediately to our region here in the Northeast, leaving Puerto Rico in the wake of the hurricane, and now being here in Western Massachusetts, identifying as Puerto Ricans, breast cancer survivors, but perhaps also having, as displaced persons from the island, different needs than, say, Puerto Rican breast cancer survivors who've been residing here a very long time, and other breast cancer survivors of other backgrounds who've been here a long time. And we know that in the representation in some of the tumor registries and other databases that are maintained here in our region, that we are not doing a good job of making sure that those communities are well represented in those databases. So the interviews down in San Juan are nearing completion. Dr. Pereira and her team have done an amazing job, and hopefully within the coming months we'll have more we can share about some of the potential similarities and differences that we're seeing.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions at this time, but I wanted to thank you, Dr. Walker, for joining us today and sharing your experience as a nurse scientist with everybody, since you kind of come from a different background than most of our other researchers. Mm-hmm. Is there any final words you had for everybody?
Again, I can just express gratitude both for the support of the Komen Foundation and all of the people and advocates and survivors who make the work possible, but also for having an opportunity to share a little bit more about what we do today. I am one of many, many, many nurse scientists and nurse innovators working all across the globe to improve health and well-being of communities and cancer survivors. And I wish I had the time and space to cheer for all of the incredible work that many of my colleagues are doing. But if anyone has any questions in the future or wants to be more involved with some of the work we're doing here, I hope they'll feel welcome to be in touch by email. And you can follow me on Twitter at UMassWalker.
All right, thank you so much. If you have any questions you would like to ask after we wrap this up, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box, or you can email researchprograms@komen.org, and we'll get those answers emailed out to everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Dr. Walker, so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Have a great afternoon.